It is 2021. My name is Justin Gage, and you're tuned in to the Aquarium Drunkard Transmissions podcast with your host, Jason Woodbury.
I never believed in the robber. I never saw nobody climb over my fence. No black bag, no gloved hand. I never believed in the robber. I figured everything it took was gone. Nothing to do, nothing to be done. I never believed in the robber. No, I never believed in the robber.
Welcome back to Transmissions. Our guest this week is Tamara Lindeman, who records under the project name The Weather Station. Her new album is called Ignorance, and it's out February 5th on Fat Possum Records. I've been a big fan of Tamara's songwriting for years now. She put out a bunch of great records on the Essential Paradise of Bachelors label, and on this new one, she really digs into kind of a more textured, rhythmic, and polished sound. It's really exciting to hear. But the lyrics, as always, are really personal, but also, I think, kind of topical in an interesting way. She's writing a lot about the climate and what it feels like to sort of watch things turn the way they have. It's not a bleak record, though. It's a record with a lot of hope, and it was a real joy to sit down and discuss it with her. Hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, go ahead and rate and review the podcast, share it with friends. Be sure to tell people that they can hear it wherever they get podcasts, or always just over at aquariumdrunkard.com, where they can get the file and listen to it however they want. If you want to take your support a step further, you can check us out over on Patreon. But without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Tamara Lindeman. We had it right after I read that Phil Spector had died. But we don't talk about that. It's nice to talk with a musical genius who hasn't murdered anybody. All right, let's get into it. Tamara, thanks so much for joining us here on the Aquarium Drunkard Transmissions podcast. It's a real honor to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you.
I love this new record so much. I've loved a handful of your records a great deal. This new one is such an exciting record, and I'm really looking forward to getting into it. But before we do that, I'm curious, what's your daily day like right now? As we are in the throes of the pandemic, and you're not able to get out on the road, and I don't assume you're in the studio every day. Maybe you are. What have your days been like lately?
I mean, lately I've been doing a lot of interviews and things like that. But before that picked up, it's been incredibly quiet. My days have been quite peaceful. I think because I'm lucky enough to be doing okay, that the pandemic hasn't hit me personally in a devastating way like it has for some people. The time has been quiet. I've had a lot of work to do, like just sort of like essentially like administering my band and music life. But I've had a lot of time to read, cook, go for long walks, do a lot of writing. It's been really nice.
Did you work a lot on this, or did you work any on the new record Ignorance, sort of in lockdown, either finishing stuff up or overdubs, anything like that?
No, it was long done. It was done and mastered, I think in December actually of last year. So December 2019.
Yeah. Wow. So you've been kind of sitting with these songs. Have you been sitting with these songs longer than you're normally sitting with your songs before they get released?
Yeah, it was a little longer in this case. The record was actually supposed to come out in October, and we pushed it back. So because of COVID, like we pushed it back in March. So yeah, it's a long time. I have gone forward and made another thing in that time. So yeah, it was sort of like I got to move past it and then return to it, which has been kind of interesting. Like for me, the biggest thing has been doing music videos has sort of allowed me to engage with the music again in a creative context, but in this like totally different way, which has been really cool. And yeah.
Well, in the videos and on the cover, you're wearing this super cool mirror suit.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, did the mirror suit come after the record?
I think I started making it in the summer, like when I was mixing the record. And it didn't connect to the record in my mind. I thought that I was making something to wear on stage for shows. And then realized I wore kind of the partially completed suit jacket on stage for one show in the summer, and realized I could not wear it on stage. And then yeah, it sort of became connected to the record in my mind, and I was like, oh, this is a part of the art for the record. This can be a part of the album art and a part of the video art, and yeah, be connected to the record visually.
Well, it really makes the videos are so arresting and so like captivating. And that suit, is such a huge part of it. The way it sort of flashes and glints, and you catch sort of these like reflections. It's really remarkable. I'm curious, before we get into maybe how it ties to the record, spiritually or in an artistic sense. Why can't you wear it on stage? Is it too hard to move in it? Is that the main reason?
Yeah, I can't sit down or move in it. And I have yet to fall in it. It's plexiglass, it's not glass.
Got it.
But I think it's a little dangerous. Yeah.
Well, I love the idea of it being a little dangerous. I feel like there's an undercurrent of danger to this record in a really cool way, right? Because you have long written sort of about what it means or what it's like to live in the world that we live in, where we're thinking about climate catastrophe. We're thinking about, obviously we're seeing the sort of thin veneer of civilization sort of torn away, and I feel like in a weird way, not in a weird way, in a very conscious way, your records have always sort of grappled with some of the things that we're dealing with right now. I think about that suit, and I think about those mirrors, and I would love to hear you talk about the way that maybe after the record was more or less done, you kind of came to understand that this visual representation could somehow be tied to what you're talking about on the record. How did that sort of revelation happen for you personally?
Well, I think I started thinking about the song Wear the World. Like I tried to wear the world like some kind of garment. Because I took some photos with the suit with a friend of mine, Rima Satter, who's a really great photographer, and just instantly realized like, oh, when I wear the suit and depending on where I am, I reflect back what's around me in this amazing way. And it looks like I'm wearing the sky, or I'm wearing the water, or I'm wearing the trees. And it makes me a part of my landscape in this really beautiful way. But that also is interesting because it's also like, it just looks so physically like uncomfortable and jagged. So it's like this strange mix of feelings in the photograph. And yeah, but it's interesting what you're saying, because I hadn't really thought about that. I feel like this suit just like has more and more metaphors to it every time I think about it. It has a new metaphor, and I'm just sort of thinking maybe you're right. Maybe it does kind of portend to this danger that's sort of running through the world right now, and sort of this strange, the artificial that we seem so ensconced in and in love with, maybe wearing this metallic silvery suit that reflects back everything around us is like is this strange touch point to how odd our lives are right now.
well, yeah, and I feel like there's something so interesting about it in that it almost feels like, you know, you are obscured by the suit, you know, and and you're kind of like hidden within it, and you know, when I watched the videos, I found myself really thinking about how at times, you know, you almost seem to sort of vanish, you know, from, you can still see you're there, you know, your form. And I think about how songs are reflections, you know, art is reflection.
Yeah.
And how it all feels so tied. Where you directed these videos, have you directed some other stuff too, or is this sort of a new foray?
No, just a totally new foray. I think part of what happened was with the other music videos I've made as The Weather Station, other people have directed them, and I've just been really annoying. So
wait, you've been annoying to direct?
Like I've like wanted to, like, you know, a lot of them were ideas that I had, you know, like the Impossible video was like, you know, like all of them were like ideas that I had in my head and gave to someone. And I've just sort of realized like, like I just needed to do it myself. Like I just needed to direct them so that I could have total control.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I've never done it before. And it was a really interesting experience. And the biggest part of it was just choosing to have that power and to just like make the decisions and to be unafraid of that was really cool. And, you know, I actually like in March of this past year, I actually had a full plan to collaborate with someone, with a director for the videos, and he was going to direct them. And that was our plan. And we actually were like about to film a video for Robert, like a completely different video in March. And COVID hit, we had to cancel our shoot. And then it was just sort of like this blessing, because it gave me the time to realize like, oh, I actually want to figure out a way to just do this myself, even though it'll be really hard. And that was the right choice for sure.
Well, the videos are incredible, so I agree that you made the right choice. Were you did you have any like Tom Cruise moments on set where you had to yell at everybody about wearing masks and staying safe, or was it a relatively, you know, worry-free situation?
Yeah, no, it was it was not worry-free, I would say, especially the Robert video. Like I like broke myself over that video. It was so hard because it was just like so many people assembling them in like a rural place, you know, managing everyone's expectations, you know, money, like logistics. It was like, you know, it was very difficult. And yeah, like the COVID situation, though everyone was actually like quite great about it. But yeah, we had to have like rules and like, you know, we had to run a really tight ship, which was really hard. But I didn't have to yell at anybody, but definitely, it's always a struggle. It's a struggle to be a leader. I'm not a very good leader. Like I haven't figured it out yet, but I'm like getting closer. But it's just so interesting when you're in a time crunch and a whole bunch of people, you know, want to talk to you and ask you questions, and you have to be very sort of selective with like,
yeah,
we don't have time for this right now.
Right.
We have to keep moving. I'm sorry. You know, like you understand how the director has like the popular depiction of the director is like yelling at everybody.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I get how that happens.
Yeah. Did you said that you don't always feel like a natural leader. Do you think that did you want to direct the videos in part so that you could flex that muscle that maybe you felt was underworked, or you know, did it feel like it was tied to the
yeah, no, I mean, I think it's just like everything else, where it's like I have actually something very vivid in my mind, and I've realized over time that actually like sometimes you just can't communicate an idea to a collaborator unless you just do it yourself. Like there's sometimes words fail, you know.
Yeah,
maybe so you have to empower yourself to carry it out, and that's sort of it. So it was just the same thing as the same experience that I've had with making records too, of like if my vision is clear enough, I actually just have to do it myself, because there's no way I'll ever be able to explain to another human what I really want. And if I try to put someone else in charge, I'm actually disempowering them. If I actually have a really clear vision, like in order to put someone in charge and ask them to be creative, I have to be free. I have to allow them the freedom to be creative. So if it's my idea, I just have to take over.
Yeah. Well, so the record is called Ignorance, which is, I think, a very charged title for a record. And it feels very, well, I mean, it feels like a lot of things. On one hand, it feels like it's like a confrontational word, right?
Yeah, it is.
And I think it's a great title for a record. But I also wonder, what is it, how did you settle on that one? How did you settle on Ignorance as the name for a record?
Yeah, I mean, it is confrontational, and that was sort of what scared me about it, but also made me feel like maybe it was the right choice. Like, I think when I first had that title in my mind, I told my partner, and he was kind of a bit taken aback. And it's interesting. I think like the reason I'm not the biggest fan of titles. I always struggle with titles, like titling songs, titling records. Like, I never really like having to title something, because I feel like it pins it down. Like if you title the song like after a line in the song, it will just, it creates a bit of a barrier where that's now the important part of the song. And if you have a title track on your record, people are like, that's the title track, and therefore it's somehow more important. You know what I mean? So
yeah, it's the banner that hangs over the whole thing.
It's the banner. Yeah. But I think that, like with not titling my last record, which felt really great, with this one, I was like, oh, by using a title, I can kind of give this little key to some of the songs and make people think about some aspect of the record that they might not have thought of. Like it just sort of shines a little light, and like it's like when I titled my album Loyalty, like I felt like that was a really cool title for that album. In the same way. And so this one, like the concept of ignorance is just similar to the mirror suit, only expanded in my mind and only felt more and more right as a choice. That's because I think, sorry, go on.
No. I say that's gotta feel good, right? For it to feel like increasingly more correct, as time goes on. I'm sure it's not always like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think like in anything, like I personally feel the best about any idea or artistic creation that just opens up over time and has more to give over time. Like I have this phrase that I use in my head with songwriting, where when I find a concept or a line or a song that is a well, it's like something that I just keep going back to, and there's always more water there. Mm-hmm. And that's a sign that like that's a song that needs to live, or like needs to be finished, or needs to be put on the record, is like when there's a well in the song. And I think that title has been a bit of a well for me. And it's interesting because obviously the world is falling apart because of ignorance. And yet it's not falling apart because of ignorance. It's falling apart because of false knowledge. It's falling apart because of people putting knowledge in places where they actually have none, and believing that they know when in fact they don't, and not having the humility to acknowledge their own ignorance. I mean, it's like when you acknowledge that you don't know, you might be able to ask questions, and you might be able to be curious, and you might want to know. An ignorance, I've started to see almost like an ignorance is like a noun, like it's like a black hole or something. It's like a blank space. And when you're like, oh, there's an ignorance here, in this conversation or in this conflict that's causing everything to warp around it. And if we can just see it, we can see like, oh, there's this thing, there's this piece that's missing. There's this thing I don't know. And if you can see that, then you might be able to want to know.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
Why I think about how the phrase, like to if somebody asks you a question and you respond, I don't know. I keep thinking about how that's like one of the most vulnerable things that you can do, right? And I don't think, to your point, it doesn't seem to me like, and I don't want to get so myopic, right, where we only think of it as like ignorance is something somebody else does. I'm trying to put it, very personally. It's scary to say I don't know, because what if you're supposed to know? What if you should know? Why don't you know? It's like there's so many things that come along with that, But then, on the other hand, I think about how it's also perhaps the most disarming and open thing you could ever say as well, right? I don't know. Yeah. You can tell me or show me or whatever. Do you feel like right now there's like sort of a fear of that vulnerability because we have so much information available to us that perhaps we're afraid that we've squandered it? Does that make any sense? I don't know. I don't know exactly where I'm going with that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I don't know how to solve the problem of misinformation, in the modern era, but I definitely think there's something very interesting going on in the way that we talk to each other, in part because so much conversation is happening over social media, and social media is specifically a place where people want to display their knowledge and their intelligence and their strength and power, and there definitely isn't room on social media to say I don't know, and I don't know is a phrase that doesn't even come into play, when we judge others too. When we look at each other on social media, we don't ever say, I don't know why that person did that, or I don't know what that means, or I don't know what really happened. It's extremely vulnerable to say, I don't know. And yet I think a lot of our, anger and defensiveness and desire to, display our intelligence and facts comes from our uncertainty about our collective uncertainty about the future, because the future has never seemed more uncertain. So of course we would want to feel, the power of, having a hot take or an interpretation. I do it too. I like interpreting.
Oh yeah, me too. Of course. Yeah. Like I think that's what, it's the most. I posted this Ursula K. Le Guin quote the other day where she said, I'm paraphrasing and botching it, but she said, a hero is someone who never says "I told you so," or nobody who's ever said "I told you so" is the hero. And I joked that I was triggered by it, but it wasn't really a joke. I was super triggered by that. I love saying "I told you so." I told you so is one of the most satisfying things in the world to say, because it's like, look, I'm valid. I'm correct. I'm objective. I'm the right. Yeah. I'm right. And I think about how that's such a human thing, and how completely understandable it is to be drawn to that, and yet. That cuts us off from so much. And I think a lot, you have always, or at least, over the last couple of years, as I've engaged with your records, I've always felt like you're someone who's interested in writing about, and you do it a lot on this record, capitalism, climate change, not small topics, big topics. Mm-hmm. And I keep thinking about how ignorance is sort of the key that allows us to talk about that stuff. And the very fact that we feel so uncertain in our unknowing, that's what often walls us off from having conversations about these things it's imperative that we have conversations about climate change. It's imperative that we have conversations about the way capitalism is eroding our ability to understand human life as something of value, or something other than, commodification, all this stuff. The robber's a perfect example, right? Where you're talking about your personal relationship to the robber, basically. You're sort of interacting with this phantom idea, and yeah. I don't know. I think it's. To me, I don't know is such a powerful tool, and I love that you called the record Ignorance, because it is, you know, we are ignorant. We're ignorant of each other so often.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I'll return to, you know, talking about climate change and capitalism, because of course I want to do that. But yeah, like like I say, I don't even know if it has anything to do with my record, but, you know, this concept of ignorance, which is like grown in my mind, is so interesting. Like, you know, this spring, you know, this June and July, you know, where, you know, so many people were confronting racism and trying to, you know, like, so many of the people I know, what they were just trying to say was, stop believing that you know me, and stop telling me that you know me, and stop making judgments about my experience. You know, like, that was such a huge part of the anger that people felt, was like, stop, you know, it's there in all of these situations. Like, you know, I think about just like the history of the country in which I live, you know, which a lot of people are really contending with right now. You know, if like people came to this unknown continent, you know, and they encountered people there, you know, and rather than being like, oh, this is incredible, like, we've discovered this unknown place filled with unknown people who we know nothing about. You know, they already had a decision about where they were. They were like, this is China. We're looking for China. And they also had a decision about who the people were, and that, you know, that they, you know, in many cases, like, deserved to be killed, you know, which is so bizarre. Like, you would think that even you know, that they would want to know what was here, and instead they, you know, the colonial powers essentially made a decision about who and what the people of this continent were, and who and what this continent was.
That's right.
And then they imposed that decision on the land and on the people, and it's continuing today.
Yeah.
And what a strange thing to build a country and a society on. And it's not surprising that it's still coming up in all of these ways. I mean, it's the same as like men, you know, through the ages, making all these theories about what women were, you know, and without ever asking a woman,
yeah, sure,
how she felt about her life or who she was, and I think it's just, anyways, that's what I think about. Is just like, it's not ignorance. It's like the false knowledge. It's this fake knowledge that shows up,
which,
you know, in all of these situations, and it keeps happening. And I don't know whether it's like innate to humanity, or whether it's more like innate to the society that we live in, that does have roots in this like colonial perspective.
and I want to clear it up, make sure that everybody understands. You're talking about Canada, which here in the United States, we unfortunately, this is all news to me. I thought you guys had it all figured out up there, and that we were the ones who were all goofed up. But I guess you're saying that's not exactly the case.
Well, I mean, Canada and the U.S. are equally guilty of you know, colonialism and genocide.
Well, yeah,
but I mean, long before our time,
sure,
long before these countries existed. But that's the roots of our respective countries, and I think Canada, you know, obviously is less, you know, there's some differences there in the way that we've handled it, and the way that we've handled, you know, various things, but you know, and I think the biggest difference is like Canadians don't really have such a national mythology that we're good.
Well,
but you know, yeah.
Yeah. So speaking from down here, the lower 48, you know, and I'm in the 48th state. I think about how that mythology is killing us. And I mean that, like, not to be like, you know, talking about this stuff is always so hard and so weird, because you're afraid that you're going to say something stupid, and I'm deeply afraid I'll say something stupid, but I'll risk it, you know, because our mythology is predicated on filling in a lot of blanks, you know, and not leaving a lot of space for an I don't know. Because an I don't know means that maybe it's not what we think it is already. And that's a thing that I think there is a human component to what you're talking about. And I think there is a human component to not wanting to say that, not wanting to feel uncertain. We all want to feel certain about stuff. And I think,
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that the record's a little bit about that too, right? Like I think, Atlantic is my favorite song on the record, and that's
Oh, thank you.
that's such a beautiful song, and it's about something so beautiful being undeniable, you know, and then also understanding that beauty is not all there is. There's something else happening too, you know, and asking ourselves, like, you know, you sing about essentially the desire to look away, and I feel that all the time. I mean, who hasn't? You know, we're recording this in January of 2021, so it's a new year, you know, and it's going to air in a couple weeks, but I imagine this is still going to be the case in a couple weeks. You know, everybody is trying to unplug because there's so much information to process. What are we supposed to do with all of this stuff? And I feel like that song kind of is about that, right? You know, it's sort of about this desire to look away, and then also the threat that if we look away too long, we're going to miss something important. You know,
Yeah.
how early in the sort of the conception of the record did that song come?
Well, I mean, that's interesting actually, because that song was like a total outlier. I've never done this before, but I actually just recorded the music with the band without words or a melody, which I've never done before. I had written some other version of that song, actually. I actually wrote that song 3 times.
Wow.
There was 3 versions, which is interesting, and I feel like I shouldn't have acknowledged that on the podcast. Yeah, that song... Yeah, it's kind of my favorite too, honestly. It's sort of so pure and just so small and simple, which I really love. And the music is the music of it is my favorite track on the record. But yeah, I think like inherent is this feeling of you know, to look at the world and to love the beauty of the world. There's this threat that's inherent in that, especially the natural world, because it is at threat. And it's like, how do you deal with that knowledge? And of course you wish that you didn't know, you know. I wish that I didn't know. And and yeah, I mean, like, there is the whole like conversation around like limiting one's access to you know, to like social, you know, like the news and everything, of course. But of course I don't intend to say that one shouldn't know. Of course I believe that we do have to look, and it does matter if we see, because we have to see, obviously.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I guess what I've been returning to over and over again in the past 2 or 3 years is just like, I really think that, you know, when people look back at this time, all they'll be able to think is like, how were people managing with this immense psychological weight of like that's never existed in human history or in any history. I mean, no animal on Earth, and so far as we know, we're the only life in the universe that we know of. You know, has anyone ever had to truly face this idea of like, you know, this destruction of so much life that's impending? Wow, I'm really getting heavy here. You know, how has anyone ever, you know, how are we holding this in our minds? I mean, I think the answer is most of us are not.
Well, sure.
But what a strange reality to have in your life. And what I find so interesting is like the last 2 years, I've just been going around saying that to people, and nobody really knows what to make of it when I say these things.
Yeah.
But you know, like, there are obviously people studying this, and like it you know, it is real. And I guess I just see it in everyone and everything now, where it's like, you know, what if the conspiracy theories and, you know, climate denial and all of these things are a response to the same feeling I feel myself in my heart, which is that I can't look at the beautiful songbirds flying around in the sunset without just having in the back of my mind this knowledge of like, songbird numbers are collapsing, you know, like we're going to lose this. And I think the denial comes from the same place that like activism and, comes from, and the same place that like the eco-fascism comes from, and so many things of just like this fear and grief. And once again, my song does not like even come close to you're taking any of this in, but we've left the song, and I'm just traveling into the stratosphere now. But like I just think that's like at the center of everything. And of course you have to look away for your sanity, and I often do, but psychology teaches you that, if you can see what the root feeling is, it's often easier to handle than when you do look away.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I want to respectfully disagree with you. I do think we're talking about the song still. in the best way possible. But beyond all that, I think you sing, I should get all this dying off of my mind in the song. And I mean, obviously for like very apparent reasons, that lyric hit me, like sort of like a ton of bricks, because it's such a, I mean, well, and to your point, the music is incredible there. It's such a, this record is, I want to talk about that in just a second, but yeah. But that heaviness and that idea, I should get all this dying off my mind. I kept turning that lyric over and over again in my head and trying to figure out how I felt about it or what it meant to me, or to be honest, I kept asking myself, I mean, I recognized it as a true statement. It's a thought I've had, over the last year. And then there's this part of me that's like, should I get all this dying off my mind? Or do I need to think about dying? You know what I mean? Or do I need to come up with better language to talk about dying? And talk about what's happening and what kind of death is not comprehensible, because death can't be comprehensible to us, but what is death, and what's and what's good, and what's a good death, versus a bad one, and are there ways to think about the world that are less extractive and less destructive, and I think the answer to all these questions is, of course, yes, and we should spend our entire lives trying to figure out how to illuminate and talk about all that stuff. But then there's this other part of me that's like, yeah, you got to unplug too, like you can't, the headlines are unrelenting. And we saw it at the turn of the year, right? Where everybody's like, well, 2021 is going to be better. And the truth is, maybe 2021 will be better. 2021 absolutely will be better in all sorts of ways. It'll probably be way worse in a lot of other ways too, you know? And I feel like, I don't know, like at the risk of sounding super goofy, I just feel like we've lost the ability, or maybe we never had it, completely, to think about these things in like less than binary terms, it was a good year or it was a bad year. It's like you're singing in that song about seeing the sunset over the Atlantic, and you're in this beautiful spot and you're having a beautiful moment that I think is probably essential to living life,
Yes.
And I think that's the other part of the song, that like these two things have to kind of hang together, in such an uncomfortable relationship with both the dread and the beauty. And if we don't have any of the beauty and it's only the dread, it becomes a sickness that we can't get over. If we only focus on the beauty and we shut out all the dread, it becomes something else that's also gross and bad. And I don't know.
Yeah.
Good song, Tamara. That's what I'm trying to say. Great song.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, yeah. And I mean, I think that like, there's a reason why, like, I often feel really bad that I use I a lot in my lyrics, like I've often thought like, oh, this is something that, if I mature, I'll grow out of using I, like you saying, I thought I, but the thing about I is like, I'm simply, like truth is something that I think a great deal about. And I really struggle and think very seriously about lyrics of like, is this true? Mm-hmm. Do I mean this? And that song is just a description of thought, right? Like I'm putting it in my own mouth. And that's why you can have that relationship to it, because I'm not expressing it as like true. I'm just expressing it as like, this is something I have thought, or this is something I thought in this moment. And therefore it's not it's not perfect. It's just the thought of a flawed human in a situation, which is so different from like a song lyric that's like coming from like an omniscient narrator. And I think like that's why I include myself in my songs, because I'm including myself as like a flawed person. But for sure, like I obviously, like as a person, like very strongly believe that we have to look at death in general, like like it's very important, and I use death in like the broadest possible terms of like death of all kinds is like, where when we shy away, we fall into doing things that are worse than the grief that we would feel if we could feel it,
Yeah, absolutely. I've become more suspicious of omniscient narrators in general over the last year.
Me too.
So I like
we all have.
I like your eye focus in that song. This record is, in addition to all the we've been talking about this, and I fear that like somebody listening to this podcast is going to be like, God damn, this record sounds like a fucking bummer. It doesn't sound like a bummer at all. This is such a fun sounding record, and I mean that like it's so deeply rhythmic. You're playing with these like textures, and there's a lot of these like I don't know, like classic West Coast pop things happening, and then sort of like jazz rock arrangements. I don't know. You're really on one with this, and I really like the way that the record has so much life in the rhythms. Did you have sort of records that served as a touchstone for you, like sonically with this one?
Yeah, tons of records. I mean, I definitely, a big part of my goal going in was just like to be not afraid of hi-fi. Like I was like, why don't I just make a record that sounds really good? And why don't I just record it in a nice studio and use great musicians? Like why have I been so afraid of trying to make a record that just sounds good, And so I was listening to a lot of stuff like, obviously like a lot of like 80s, 80s and late 70s pop. But even I remember listening to like, I don't know, like modern like hip hop and stuff just for like sonic ideas. Because I love, I'm as a listener, I really love, philosophy and ideas and thinking, and, I love like super lo-fi, in the moment records, but I also love like to listen on headphones and just get that beautiful like ear candy. And I think I wanted this record to just be passionate and kind of like overwhelm with like sumptuousness and beauty and like as you say, texture. There's a ton of texture, and I just I was excited to make something just like really overwhelming sonically and musically and for the ears that could sort of carry maybe some of these thoughts about like really dark shit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it certainly helps get that stuff across, Yeah. I'm curious about the maybe the hesitance and the reluctancy to take that approach in the past. I mean, your records they've certainly sounded maybe smaller in terms of, or more intimate, in terms of like more simplistic is the wrong way to put it. I mean it, sort of like essentials. You've focused and sort of prized a certain intimacy on the records, and this has that too. Yes. But it's got like intimacy and maximalism. Were you worried in the past of simply feeling overblown or overstating things? Like where did some of that hesitancy come from, you think?
Oh, I mean, I think that I just had a bit of that like piety, that sort of started with All of It Was Mine, where I had this experience of making this like lo-fi record in a few days, with one other person, and then that record sort of had this power that I really did not expect it to have, and like had no idea it had, and I didn't know what to attribute that to, because it didn't occur to me. I didn't know what it was. And so I think I kind of had a bit of that feeling of like, oh, it's all about, the recording has to be all about the moment, and you can't, use a click track. And like that, I had for a long time that feeling of like, when a record's really well recorded, it doesn't have as much emotion in it, or when the band is really tight, it's not as emotional. Like, it's better to have like a less tight band that, it's like the Neil Young Crazy Horse sort of theory.
Yeah.
And it's funny because there is a part of me that agrees with that, but
yeah, me too.
I think it just depends on how you use these tools, right? Like, because I think what switched for me was like, what if I use like steady rhythm as a tool? Like, what if I use really nice recording as a tool, and like, what could I do with that? I think I was afraid of that because I think I thought like that the like scruffiness of the way that I liked things to sound, like if I lost that, I would lose like the emotion or the honesty. And I think, yeah, it was super scary to just be like, what if I try to trust like my arrangements and my performances over like, and let go of some of these ideas. So yeah, that's where the fear came from. But like everything, I don't know why. I'm just like, the moment I realize I'm afraid of something, I need to like do it.
Yeah, I love that.
Like, and it's so funny too, because it's like all of it was already like a response to like my fear of like, like my first record was like super maximal and intense and all over the place and crazy, and I thought that was what made it good. And then I realized I was afraid to just like expose like just the songs. So then that's what I did. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I always think about how when Brian Wilson was making Pet Sounds with the Beach Boys, Mike Love said, "Don't fuck with the formula." And I remember like that's always stuck in my head almost as much as the Neil Young, make sure everybody's like slightly drunk and stoned so that it feels human. I love both of those things, and I think about both of those things. Pet Sounds obviously being a record where the formula was significantly screwed around with, and talk about emotion and maximalness. Maximalness is that's embarrassing, but yeah. But you know what I mean? Like, there's this intensity to what's happening. Were there moments in the recording where you achieved that thing you wanted of like it being emotional and true and heavy and real and sumptuous? Were there some moments kind of early on where you were like, I gotta trust my gut on this one?
Yeah, for sure. Like the recording of the record was. The recording of the record was actually, it's funny that you use the word fun, because I was like, yeah, the recording of the record was actually really fun. It was really positive. Like we were so stoked in the recording studio. We were all smiles, and that's such a good sign. It means that that you're doing something good.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I'm trying to remember, like I think like from the very beginning, I was just like, oh no, this is great. Like there were definitely things that freaked me out. But for the most part, I felt pretty positive when we were recording, and yeah, like everyone just exceeded my expectations. Like, like Kieran on the drums, like I had never played with him, I had never worked with him before. And he just had exactly this thing that I wanted, which is like, he's so good. Like it's like a drum machine. Like he's so good and he's so consistent, but somehow it just you feel it. And that's the alchemy that I wanted. And I was just so pleased instantly, like, and felt, like super confident about the record while we were tracking it, which is really great.
Yeah.
and beautiful. So yeah.
You sing, well, you spent a lot of your life working as an actor. And on the record, you sing, I used to be an actor, now I'm a performer. So my question is, did you write that question simply because you wanted music journalists to ask you about your acting career, or was there some other reason?
Oh, wait, where do I say that? Like in the in.
Do you not sing on the record? I used to be an actor, now I'm a performer. That's just in the bio.
No, I think it's maybe in the bio or something. I don't know. I think maybe it just wound up in the bio. Like I usually hate when people ask me about it.
No, I know.
I know that people will. So I was just like, I feel like I've just been getting much better at like acknowledging it and like being like, oh yeah, that was me too. Even though, yeah, like that was me. You know, I did that, and I've been trying to like take ownership over that experience a little bit more than I have in the past.
Yeah, I totally botched it as a joke. I meant that as a joke, that I didn't. I knew you probably didn't want people to ask you exclusively about being an actor.
Yeah, totally.
But because I hear you, people, that is something that obviously, the reason people want to seize on that is because they haven't been actors. And so we want to know what's it like. But I guess what I am curious about is if, this far into making great records, if there has been something for you where you do feel more comfortable in the idea of performance, because I don't know, I think that maybe there's that sort of punk rock authenticity thing that people can kind of get stuck in, where they're afraid of the idea of performing.
Yes.
But I mean, as an artist, what else is there? You know what I mean? And I just and I mean, performance is just like ignorance, not a thing that we need to be afraid of. It's just like you said, a tool. So do you feel like you've become more comfortable with the idea of performance as a tool?
Yeah, absolutely. I really have, and I think it started for me maybe where I saw a quote somewhere that was like, persona can be a way of maintaining your privacy.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, I understand now. Like, I understand why David Bowie, wore crazy outfits and makeup. And, it doesn't mean that, I mean, David Bowie was like a singular genius and like, incredible human, I'm sure. But like that a persona can be a way of keeping parts of yourself for yourself. And I think I've started to see like performance and persona as sort of being actually these beautiful protective things, and also a way to put forth like a deeper part of yourself, like an unexpressed part of yourself, like to perform, to be a performer and give a performance that, maybe doesn't touch on like, the weird dinner you had before, the show, and the sort of like awkward conversation you had with your bandmate, like just to set all of the like regular life things aside and just embrace this like heightened thing, that's at the heart of what you're doing, is actually like a great choice. And being hampered by like the sort of punk rock authenticity, it's like the lo-fi piety, like it
exactly, that's what I was
really
thinking.
important. It's important, and there's like such an important piece in it, but there's also like it's also a bit of a prison. Like, I think I've been thinking a lot about like truth and performance and like all of these things, and like, where do they all intersect? And I think sometimes it's like we don't have the right words because it's complicated, but like I think the thing that people don't like and that I don't like is when it feels like a commercial, or it feels like propaganda, or it feels like it's trying to like extract something from you. That's the kind of performance or performing or that people don't like. But when it's sort of like performing a deeper truth, or a persona that is like a bit of a wall that has a secret garden behind it, like I think that's actually kind of beautiful. And I see for myself just this like, it makes me feel a bit free to imagine embracing some of those things in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that that's an interesting way to put it, because I mean, performance is, I mean, a a bad performance is all the things you just mentioned. You know, a bad performance is propaganda. A good performance is art. Is you making something that it, you know, wouldn't exist otherwise, and imbuing it with that part of you. You know, and I just think about how, you know, I just felt like that stuff started to emerge so much on the self-titled record too. You know, this sort of like willingness to I don't want to say embrace, like, you know, I don't know, to embrace the performative as a tool, as an access way, to the deeper truths, and understanding that, like, you know, you're never going to get to the deeper truths talking a normal language because that's why they're deeper truths, you know, they're obscured by our day to day. So I think
no, that's totally true. Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Do you, you know, obviously you were able to do some videos, and you've probably done, have you done any live stream stuff over the last, you know, year?
Yeah, I did a few things, but I really didn't like it.
Yeah.
It's that we're like, we've been planning this like live stream that's like with the full band from the album, like, and you know, it's like going to be recorded really nicely, like filmed really, like, it's like basically like we're making like a concert film.
Hell yeah.
That goes on the internet, you know, called a live stream, which is very different from like me on Instagram Live, you know, playing my piano. But yeah, like we're actually like right now, I mean, on Monday, having to figure out whether we have to postpone it because the COVID numbers are spiking in Ontario, and it's like this weird gray area where we're like allowed to do it, but it's like, you know, gathering 15 people in a room doesn't feel like a good idea.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, that's been a big thing that I've been planning, and I've been putting a lot of my like eggs in that basket of like, oh my God, I'm going to just like do one show, you know, even though nobody's going to be there. I was really excited and really excited to do it. So it's going to happen no matter what. It's just like might be postponed.
Well,
yeah.
I'm curious if you have found that being off the stage, you know, have you missed that side of things? And what has it felt like to be disconnected from that side of things? That sort of feedback loop that happens when you're on stage and singing and people hear it and you're hearing your bandmates and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it is surprising how little I've missed it in a way, but that's also like kind of my personality. Like whatever's happening, I'll just deal with it. But the two things I miss the most are like, I really miss traveling. Like I really love sitting in a car driving down the highway. Like despite the carbon emissions, obviously, like I love traveling and I love being in the world, and I really loved the way that touring allowed me to be in the world, because it's you're in the world and you're constantly moving, but you're not a tourist, you know, like you're not there to look around and to like get something out of it. You're there to like do a job. And I love the strange, like very particular window that gives me on like different countries of like, I know all about their highway systems and like I haven't been to a single museum, you know, like
yeah.
And just this sort of like, I just find it's really nice for my brain to just get out of Toronto and get out of Canada and get out of North America and just like be other places and talk to other people and just have that other perspective. So I really miss that. And I also really miss playing with the band. Like I really miss playing music with people and that give and take and that connection that happens where, you know, it's such a deep bond that forms, you know, even if, you know, when you're chatting with friends on the phone or, you know, on Zoom or, you know, going for a walk outside or what, you know, socially distanced or whatever, like it's not the same kind of connection as it is to like share a life, which is essentially what you do when you're in a band. Like you're sharing, you know, a hotel room and a meal, and like, it's just sort of like this really different, and then you're sharing this like immense thing of playing music and performing. And so I really miss that connection.
Yeah, I have to imagine that it's intense to not have that. But do you feel like the songs that you've written since then sort of reflect any of that stuff, or have you been writing more specifically about other stuff right now?
Well, I haven't actually been writing songs like for the last while, because I made another thing after this record, so that's also in the can, and I don't know, that something just stops me from like opening up another door, of like having another thing that I won't be able to put out for a while.
Yeah, you don't want to have three albums waiting. Just like
it just would hurt. But I think I actually like have been thinking the last week or so, like often a record for me starts with like an idea. Like I don't know why, but I really don't write songs like every day, like until I'm like writing a record, like, and then I write songs every day, and I write a lot of songs, but like I often need like a concept, like I need like a door to open and tell me like this needs to be written about, and that's always what's driven me. Like I sometimes wonder like if I can imagine myself being someone who like doesn't write songs at all, and part of that is like over the last year, like through the pandemic, like for some reason, like I turned away from music. Like it felt a little bit like sad to play music at first. So I started writing like words on paper, and I've been writing a lot, which has been like really cool. And like, I'm really glad it's like a whole new thing that's opening up for me, is like getting better at writing and getting better with words. And so I feel like when I go back to music, I'm going to be that much more comfortable. And I also did a lot of like piano practice and like learning theory and stuff, which I've never done. So I feel like I'm like arming myself with these new tools, but I don't yet have like the door that I need to kick down to write something new. Like I haven't found it. Like this record and the one that follows it are so big in my mind. I just like can't find like what the new well is.
Yeah.
But that's always happened. Like it's always like I don't know what the need is, and then like something happens or something changes, where I just sort of start to conceive of something that pulls me into writing a new thing. And that's sort of started to happen lately, like where I'm starting to feel that like that desire of like, oh, like I can start to hear, I can start to see it in my mind of like, oh, maybe this is worth writing about. But yeah, it's tough because the themes of this record and like the next one are so big that like it's kind of like still where I'm at in a way. Like I'm still thinking about all these same things. Like I'm still grappling with all these same things. Like I haven't moved on to the next thing in my mind. And yeah, I don't know. Like sorry, it's a really long answer. You were asking about band. Yeah, I have most of what I've like kind of written. I guess I shouldn't say I'm not writing music, because I kind of have written some things a little bit, and they are like way more insular and like super like solitary in style. And a lot of the music I've been listening to is like really insular and solitary. So yeah, that's probably, yeah, I don't know. I hope that it's like, yeah, it's like I have to dream the record before I can make it. And that's happened every time, of like imagining the record and then making it. Is usually how it works the best. Yeah. Well, this one is such a good one, and I really appreciate you taking the time to hash it out with me and to kind of unpack some of the intense stuff that's going on in this record. I know that we failed to completely explain the mysteries of human existence and our failed and our impending destruction. But I think that there was still some good stuff, came out of it. So yeah. Oh man. Well, and I really like your writing, and thank you so much for interviewing me so thoughtfully. Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. Thanks for this great record, and I hope we'll get a chance to talk again soon. Yeah, totally. Thanks. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Jason P. Woodbury. I write, host, and produce Transmissions, and I want to personally thank you for listening. Our audio editor is Andrew Horton. Jonathan Mark Walls creates video content for our social media platforms. You can find us on most of those. And for YouTube,
Our graphic designer is Sarah Goldstein. And our executive producer and Aquarium Drunkard founder is Justin Gage. If you want to support what we do at Aquarium Drunkard, you can check us out on Patreon. And if you want to let me know what you like about the show, or I guess even what you don't like about the show, you can find my contact info on aquariumdrunkard.com. We've got all sorts of great stuff up on the site, lots of radio shows for you to check out, audio-visual joints, interviews, features, songs we love. You're guaranteed to find something cool over at Aquarium Drunkard, so check it out. We'll be back next week with another strange conversation for these strange times, joined by Yasmin Williams. She's got a great new record of acoustic guitar compositions called Urban Driftwood out on Spinster Records. So stay tuned for that and stay safe until then. Talk soon.